The rift tore open without sound. No thunder, no warning. Just a wound in the fabric of night bleeding pale light across the Koyoharu forest. The trees bent away from it as if recoiling from something fundamentally wrong. Branches twisted. Leaves fell despite no wind. The mountain itself seemed to hold its breath. Kaneki fell through. His body struck earth with enough force to crack stone. The impact carved a crater into the mountainside, scattering moss and ancient roots like shrapnel. Debris hung in the air for a heartbeat before gravity remembered its job. He lay at the center of the destruction, motionless white hair splayed against dark soil like frost, spreading across burned ground. The rift sealed behind him. The wrongness vanished with it. Only moonlight remained cold and indifferent, painting everything silver. He didn't move. Minutes passed. An hour, maybe. Time felt slippery here, like trying to hold water in hands that no longer remembered how to close properly. When his eyes finally opened, they were gray. Not the red-black of a ghoul in hunger. Not even the exhausted gold of someone who'd fought too long. Just empty. The kind of hollow that comes after screaming until your throat bleeds and finding that nothing changed. Nothing stopped. Nothing got better. This wasn't Tokyo. The realization came slowly, like blood seeping through bandages. The air tasted different, cleaner, wrong. No exhaust fumes coating the back of his throat. No concrete dust settling in his lungs. No distant sirens wailing through streets that never slept, never stopped, never forgave. Just wind through leaves. The smell of earth that hadn't been touched by industry. The silence of a world that didn't know what RC cells were. Kaneki pushed himself to his knees. His hands shook. Not from weakness, his body had healed from the fall, almost instantly, bones knitting back together with the efficient brutality of ghoul regeneration. No, the trembling came from something deeper. The effort of holding back. The constant crushing weight of keeping the monster inside from clawing its way out. The RC cells in his body stirred like a second heartbeat. Unstable. Hungry. Still remembering what it felt like to be dragon. To stop being Ken Kaneki and become something that existed only to consume. To feed. To grow. To devour until nothing remained but screaming, and the taste of ash, and the knowledge that he'd killed everyone he ever loved. He clenched his fists until his nails drew blood. The pain helped, a little. Not enough, not again. Never again. The forest around him had already begun to change. Where his blood touched soil, the grass paled. Not death exactly. Something worse. The green faded to sickly white, then shifted toward a pale, arterial red. The color of flesh drained of warmth, but not quite dead. The corruption spread slowly, a creeping wrongness that turned living things into something caught between states. He needed to move. Needed to hide before the RC leakage spread too far. Before something noticed. Before whatever lived in this world came looking for the source of the contamination. Kaneki stood on legs that threatened to buckle. Not from injury. From exhaustion that went deeper than muscle or bone. The kind of tired that came from carrying a weight no one else could see. From being afraid of yourself. From knowing that the greatest threat to everyone around you was the fact that you existed. He looked around properly for the first time. Dense wilderness stretched in every direction. Mountain slopes thick with trees he didn't recognize. The trunks were wrong, too straight, too uniform, like they'd been planted by someone who cared about aesthetic over function. No power lines cutting through the canopy. No buildings crouching between trees. No lights bleeding into the night sky and drowning out stars. just stars. More than he'd ever seen in Tokyo, scattered across darkness like broken glass, like someone had shattered the moon and let the pieces fall. Where was this? When was this? The architecture of the world felt old. Not ancient, but pre-modern, pre-industrial. The kind of old that Tokyo had buried under concrete and steel and neon. He couldn't place it, couldn't even begin to guess. The wrongness settled into his chest like a stone. Heavy, cold, absolute. He'd been ripped from one world and thrown into another. No warning, no choice, no way back. No way to know if anyone he'd left behind was safe. No way to protect them. No way to fix anything. The weight of it should have crushed him. Instead, something colder took hold. A terrible, bitter relief that made him hate himself even more. Maybe this was better. Maybe being erased from Tokyo meant he couldn't hurt anyone there anymore. Couldn't lose control. Couldn't wake up one morning wearing someone else's face and find their blood under his fingernails. Couldn't look at Tuka and wonder how long until he killed her too. Maybe disappearing was the kindest thing he could do for the people who'd made the mistake of caring about him. A branch snapped in the darkness. Kaneki's head turned sharply. His senses sharper than any human's, sharper than most ghouls, swept the forest like radar. Nothing. No heartbeat. No breathing. No footsteps. Just wind and his own paranoia painting threats in shadows. But the RC cells in his body pulsed outward anyway. An involuntary wave of pressure like a heartbeat made of wrongness spreading through the trees. Somewhere distant, something screamed. High and inhuman and full of rage. The sound of a predator that had just discovered something worse than itself existed. Then silence, abrupt and total. Whatever had screamed was either dead or running. He'd affected something, just by existing, just by breathing. Kaneki closed his eyes. The weight pressed down harder. He needed to move, away from here, away from wherever that rift had dropped him. Deep into the wilderness, where nothing lived and nothing could be hurt by his presence. Where he could hide until he figured out how to stop the RC leakage. Or until his body finally gave up and let him stop being a problem. He started walking, one foot in front of the other. The simple mechanics of movement. The only thing he could control when everything else felt like drowning. He didn't look back at the crater. Didn't acknowledge the pale corruption spreading through the vegetation around it like infection. Didn't let himself think about what would happen if he stayed in one place too long. If the contamination reached people. If this world had people. If they hunted monsters the way CCG had hunted ghouls. He just walked. Into a forest that smelled like a world that had forgotten what ghouls were. Into a darkness that felt clean in a way Tokyo's darkness never had. Into a silence that would have been peaceful if he could stop hearing his own heartbeat counting down the seconds until he lost control again. Behind him, the leaves where his blood had fallen continued to change. Not brown, not gray. A pale, sickly red like flesh stripped of life but not quite dead. The contamination spread outward in a perfect circle. Slow. Inevitable. Beautiful in the way rot could be beautiful when you looked at it with the right eyes. Or the wrong ones. Kaneki walked until the crater disappeared behind trees and terrain, until the only sound was his own breathing and the whisper of wind through leaves that hadn't been poisoned yet. He walked until exhaustion finally won. Then he collapsed against a tree trunk, slid down to sit in moss. That would be dead by morning, and tried not to think about the fact that he'd survived the fall. Tried not to think about the fact that he was still alive. Tried not to wonder if that was mercy or punishment. The moon watched him through gaps in the canopy. Cold, distant, indifferent. He closed his eyes and waited for something to find him. Hoped it would be fast. Knew it wouldn't be. The woodcutter found it first. Old Takeshi had been working these slopes for 40 years. Knew every trail, every landmark, every tree worth harvesting. When he crested the ridge that morning and saw the clearing that hadn't existed yesterday, his axe slipped from numb fingers. A crater, 20 paces wide, carved into solid stone like something had fallen from the heavens with enough force to shatter the mountain's bones. But that wasn't what made his breath catch. The trees around the impact site had changed. Their leaves hung limp and pale, drained of color like blood-starved flesh. The grass had turned a sickly white that shifted toward red in certain light. Even the moss on the rocks looked diseased, as if something had leached the life out of it without quite killing it. Takeshi backed away slowly. His grandfather had told stories about cursed places, about ground that rejected life, about things that fell from the sky and brought misfortune. He ran. By noon, the entire village knew. By evening, the local magistrate had sent word to the regional authorities. By the next dawn, the reports had reached the Demon Slayer Corps. Something unnatural had arrived in Koyoharu Forest. The scouts went in first. 3 of them, young and eager blades, sharp and breathing techniques honed. They found the crater easily, found the contamination spreading outward in concentric rings, found trees that looked like they were rotting from the inside out, despite still standing, found tracks leading deeper into the forest. Human-shaped, barefoot. The stride uneven, like whoever made them had been stumbling. They followed. The deeper they went, the worse it got. The contamination thickened. Animals fled before them, deer crashing through undergrowth and panic birds erupting from trees in shrieking clouds. Even insects avoided the path ahead. The air itself felt heavy, oppressive, like breathing through wet cloth. The youngest scout, barely 16, pressed a hand to his chest. His breathing technique faltered for just a moment. The pressure increased. He tasted copper on the back of his tongue. "Something's ahead," the leader whispered. His hand tightened on his blade. "Be ready." They found another clearing, smaller. No crater this time, just a depression where something had sat against a tree trunk. The bark had turned that same pale red. The moss beneath had died completely, and the tracks continued, always deeper, always away from civilization. Whatever made them wasn't hunting, wasn't seeking prey or territory. It was fleeing, hiding, trying to get as far from people as possible. That scared the leader more than aggression would have. The Corps received their report the same day. Villagers near the forest's southern edge began showing symptoms. Headaches, disorientation, a ringing in their ears that wouldn't stop. 3 elderly residents collapsed in the street with no apparent cause. A farmer found his livestock dead in their pen, no marks on them, no signs of struggle. Just dead. The local doctor had no explanation. The priests called it a curse. The magistrate demanded answers. The Corps dispatched investigators. Then the demons started acting strange. A lower moon prowling the region's western valleys went berserk for no apparent reason. Tore through an entire hamlet in a frenzy, killing without eating, destroying without purpose. When demon slayers finally cornered it, the creature was raving, screaming about something in the forest, something that made its blood burn, something that shouldn't exist. It died, still screaming, Another demon, this one, a lesser creature barely stronger than a human, was found dead near the forest's edge. No wounds, no signs of battle. Its body had simply shut down, as if its cells had forgotten how to function. The Corps' message network lit up with reports. Strange occurrences, unexplained deaths, demons fleeing certain areas or attacking with unprecedented violence. All centered around Koyoharu Forest. All within 5 days of the crater's appearance. At the Ubuyashiki estate, Kagaya listened to the reports with closed eyes. His daughters read them aloud, voices calm, despite the implications. Unnatural contamination spreading through Koyoharu Forest. Villages reporting illnesses, demons exhibiting abnormal behavior. 3 scouting parties sent. All returned reporting intense pressure and an oppressive atmosphere. Tracks suggest a humanoid entity moving deeper into the wilderness. Kagaya was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of certainty. Mobilize the Hashira. Whatever has arrived in that forest, it's not a demon. Not as we understand them. But it's dangerous. Perhaps more dangerous than anything we've faced. Shall we attempt contact? One daughter asked. No. Observation first. We need to understand what we're dealing with. And we need to protect the civilians in the surrounding areas. Evacuate the villages closest to the contamination zone. Establish a perimeter. No one enters that forest without my direct authorization. The orders went out that night. By morning, the Demon Slayer Corps had mobilized its full resources. They were hunting something new. Something that even demons feared. In the forest, Kaneki felt the shift. He'd been moving for days, staying ahead of the scouts, avoiding contact. His senses picked up their heartbeats long before they came close. He made sure they found his tracks leading away from civilization. Made sure they understood he wasn't a threat to people. But the RC cells in his body continued leaking. Continued contaminating everything he touched. Continued spreading that wrongness through a world that had no defense against it. He tried to stop it. Tried to contain the leakage through sheer will. It didn't work. His body was still unstable from the dragon transformation. Still trying to find equilibrium. Still failing. 3 more days and the contamination would reach the nearest village. He couldn't let that happen. Kaneki changed direction, headed for the deepest part of the forest where the maps he'd glimpsed in the scout's hands showed nothing but blank space. Where no trails went. Where even hunters didn't venture. If he was going to contaminate something better, it'd be empty wilderness than people. But even as he pushed deeper, he felt the pressure building. Not from outside, from within. The hunger was getting worse. He'd eaten nothing since arriving. Couldn't eat the animals here, their flesh would do nothing for him. Couldn't approach villages for obvious reasons. And the thought of what he'd have to do if the hunger got bad enough made him want to tear his own throat out. He'd survived on willpower before. In Yamori's torture chamber, in Koklia, in a dozen other hells. He could do it again. He had to. The alternative was becoming the monster everyone would eventually believe him to be anyway. On the 7th day, he found a cave system deep in the mountain's heart. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for a person. Inside, the tunnels twisted into darkness, so complete that even his enhanced vision struggled. Perfect. Kaneki crawled inside, moved deep enough that no light from outside could reach. Found a chamber where the stone felt ancient and untouched. He sat against the wall and focused every scrap of willpower on containing the RC leakage. It didn't work. The contamination continued spreading, slower maybe, but inevitable. He closed his eyes, tried not to think about hunger, tried not to think about the fact that he could hear heartbeats in the distance. Dozens of them, slayers probably, establishing their perimeter, preparing their hunt. Tried not to think about what would happen when they found him. Tried not to think at all. Outside, the forest continued changing. The contamination crept outward like slow poison. Trees bent under its weight. Animals fled. The very air grew thick with something that had no name in this world. And in the villages, people whispered about the curse that had fallen from the sky. About the white demon hiding in Koyoharu forest. About the thing that even monsters feared. The rumors spread faster than the contamination. By the time the Hashira arrived, everyone knew. Something was coming. Something had to be stopped. And the Demon Slayer Corps would be the ones to do it. The convoy left Jinsu village at dawn. 12 children, 3 elderly caretakers, 1 young mother clutching an infant to her chest. Evacuees heading east toward the regional capital, where the Demon Slayer Corps had established refugee camps, away from the forest, away from the contamination zone, away from whatever had people whispering prayers in the middle of the day. The road wound through foothills, where morning mist still clung to the ground. The cart driver kept his pace steady despite tired horses. They needed to reach the next village before nightfall. Traveling after dark was suicide evacuation orders or not. 3 hours from Jinsu, the demons found them. The first one dropped from the trees without warning. It landed on the cart's roof with enough force to crack wood. The horses screamed. The driver reached for his blade, a simple knife. Nothing blessed, nothing special, and the demon tore his throat out before he could draw it. The second demon came from the road ahead, blocking their path, grinning with too many teeth. The third and fourth emerged from the mist on either side. The elderly caretaker at the front, a woman who'd survived 60 winters and buried 3 husbands, pushed the children behind her and raised shaking hands. No weapon, no training, just a grandmother trying to shield 12 terrified faces with her body. The demon on the cart roof laughed. It sounded like breaking glass. Then it lunged. The Kaguni burst from Kaneki's back before conscious thought could stop it. 4 tendrils of white-red biomass, each as thick as a man's arm, moved faster than the demon could process. The first tendril pierced through its chest, the second wrapped around its throat. The third and fourth spread wide, creating a barrier between the demon and the children. The demon's laughter cut off. It looked down at the Kaguni, impaling it, confusion replacing cruelty in its eyes. This wasn't a breathing style. This wasn't a blade. This was something alive. Something wrong. Kaneki ripped the tendrils out sideways. The demon came apart. Not cleanly, not quickly. Its torso split from sternum to spine organs, tumbling out in a wet cascade before disintegrating to ash. The head separated last, still wearing that confused expression as it dissolved. The other 3 demons froze. Kaneki stood in the middle of the road, Kaguni writhing behind him, like serpents that couldn't decide if they were attacking or defending. White hair hung in his face. Gray eyes reflected nothing. His clothes were torn from days in the wilderness, stained with dirt, and his own blood from RC leakage that wouldn't stop. He looked like something that had crawled out of a grave. The second demon, the one blocking the road ahead, hissed. Its eyes flicked from Kaneki to the ash still settling where its companion had been. Whatever this was, it wasn't human. Wasn't demon either. The smell was wrong. The presence was wrong. Everything about it made the demon's instinct scream, run. It didn't run. Demons didn't flee from prey. It charged. Kaneki's Kagune met it halfway. Two tendrils shot forward like striking snakes. The demon dodged the first, twisted under the second, came up inside Kaneki's guard with claws extended. The third tendril caught it across the chest. Not a pierce, a slash. The Kagune's edge was sharper than any blade, sharp enough to cut molecular bonds, sharp enough to disrupt demon cells on contact. The creature's torso opened like a flower in bloom. Red, then ash, then nothing. The last two demons broke. They ran, not toward the convoy, not toward Kaneki, just away. Pure animal panic overriding demonic hunger. Kaneki let them go. His Kagune retracted slowly. The tendrils withdrew into his back with the wet sound of muscle sliding against muscle. The holes in his shirt where they'd emerged closed as his body healed over the exit wounds. Within seconds, there was no physical evidence they'd ever existed, except for the ash still drifting down like gray snow, and the blood on the ground where the cart driver had died. Kaneki turned toward the convoy. Every person stared at him. The grandmother's hands were still raised protectively. The children huddled behind her, some crying silently, some too shocked to make sound. The young mother held her infant so tight, the child was turning red. No one spoke. Kaneki opened his mouth, closed it. What could he say? How did you explain what you were to people who'd just watched you tear demons apart with appendages that grew from your spine? The grandmother found her voice first. Thank you. 2 words, barely a whisper, but they hit harder than any blade. Kaneki took a step back. The children flinched. He took another step, kept backing away. His hands were shaking again, not from exertion, from the effort of not letting the hunger show. The demons were dead. Their flesh was gone. But the scent lingered, and something in him that wasn't quite human anymore wanted. He crushed the thought before it could finish forming. Keep moving, he said. His voice came out rough, unused. More might come. Don't stop until you reach the camps. The grandmother nodded slowly. She turned to the surviving caretakers, began organizing the children back into the cart. Someone would have to drive now. Someone would have to explain what happened to the authorities when they arrived. Someone would have to explain what saved them. Kaneki turned and walked into the mist before they could ask questions. He didn't look back. Couldn't. If he looked back, he might see the fear in their eyes. Might see them recoiling from him the way people always did when they realized what he was. Might see the children learning to associate his face with monsters. Better to be a shadow. Better to be a rumor. Better to disappear. His Kagune ached. The exertion hadn't been much. Those demons were weak, barely stronger than humans, but his body was still unstable. Still hemorrhaging RC with every breath. Still trying to find equilibrium while balanced on the edge of transformation. The hunger gnawed harder now. He'd burned energy fighting, energy he couldn't replace. Not without eating, not without doing something that would prove every fearful whisper right. Kaneki pressed deeper into the foothills, away from roads, away from people, back toward the forest, where he could hurt no one but himself. Behind him, the convoy reached the next village 2 hours before sunset. The grandmother told their story to the local magistrate, to the Demon Slayer Corp representative stationed there, to anyone who would listen. A white-haired figure emerged from nowhere, killed 2 demons in seconds, saved 12 children without asking for payment or thanks, then vanished into mist before anyone could stop him. Was it a slayer? The magistrate asked. The grandmother shook her head. No blade, no breathing style. Something grew from his back. Living tendrils. white and red like exposed muscle. The demons died just from touching them. A demon, then, the Corps representative pressed. No, the grandmother's voice was certain. Demons don't save children. Demons don't flee from prey. Whatever he wasn't trying to hurt us. The young mother spoke up, still clutching her infant. His eyes, they looked sad. Not angry or hungry, just sad, like he was carrying something too heavy. The Corps representative made notes, sent runners with the new information. By evening, the report had reached the nearest Hashira garrison. White-haired entity, unknown abilities, killed demons effortlessly, saved civilians, then retreated voluntarily, inconsistent with demonic behavior, inconsistent with anything in their records. The Hashira meeting that night was tense. Sanemi wanted immediate mobilization, hunt it down, kill it before it killed them. Giyu counseled observation. If it saved children, it might not be hostile. Shinobu wanted samples, wanted to understand what those tendrils were made of, wanted to know how something could kill demons without a Nichiren blade. Mitsuri just looked sad. It sounds lonely, she said quietly, running away after saving them, not wanting thanks. Oyakata-sama listened to them all, made his decision. Continue the hunt, but do not engage unless it threatens civilians. Observation and containment only. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we act. The orders went out, but in the villages, another story spread. Not the Corps' official version, not careful observation protocols or containment strategies. The people's version. Whispered over evening meals, told to children who asked why they'd been evacuated, shared between travelers who'd heard it from someone who'd heard it from someone who'd been there. The white demon of Koyoharu Forest. A ghost or spirit or something without a name. It appeared when monsters attacked the innocent, killed demons with living weapons, saved lives without asking for anything in return, then vanished before anyone could thank it. Some said it was a guardian spirit awakened by the contamination. Some said it was a slayer who'd been transformed by some curse, but retained his duty. Some said it was something that fell from the sky and still remembered what it meant to be human. No one knew for certain. But everyone agreed on one thing. The white demon killed monsters. The white demon saved children. And the white demon was hiding in the forest like it was afraid of what would happen if it stayed. In his cave deep within Koyoharu's heart, Kaneki heard none of this. He only heard the hunger, and the screaming in his own mind that wouldn't stop, and the knowledge that he'd saved those children today. But tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after that, the hunger might win. And then who would save them from him? He closed his eyes and tried not to answer that question. Tried not to remember what human flesh tasted like. Tried not to remember that he'd already killed everyone he loved once before. The darkness offered no comfort. It never did. The Hashira arrived in force. 7 of them. 8 if you counted Giyu, who moved like a shadow at the group's edge, present but separate. They converged on the Koyoharu region with the precision of a military operation. Observation only Oyakata-sama had said. But Sanemi brought enough blades to start a war, and the look in his eyes suggested observation wasn't high on his list of priorities. They established a command post in a village 3 miles from the forest's edge. Far enough to be safe from the contamination, close enough to respond if the white demon emerged. Shinobu set up a field laboratory immediately. She wanted samples of the affected vegetation soil from the crater blood if they could find any. Understanding the biological mechanism was crucial, she argued. You couldn't fight what you didn't understand. Mitsuri helped evacuate the remaining civilians. Her gentle voice and patient explanations calmed people better than official orders ever could. She made sure everyone got to safety, even stopped to help an elderly man carry his belongings when his hands shook too badly to manage alone. Muichiro scouted the forest's perimeter, silent, efficient. His mist obscured his movements, made him nearly impossible to track. If anyone could find the white demon without being detected, it was him. Gyome prayed. The stone Hashira's massive hands were clasped, tears running down his scarred face as he asked for guidance, for wisdom, for the strength to protect the innocent and the mercy to see truth clearly. Obanai coordinated with local authorities, established patrol routes, verified evacuation protocols, made sure every village within 10 miles had runners ready to send warning if the situation escalated. And Sanemi sharpened his blades. Tanjiro arrived 3 days later with Zenitsu Inosuke and Nezuko. They'd been in the eastern provinces when the summons came, rushed west as fast as their legs could carry them, arrived dusty and exhausted, but ready. The command post briefing was tense. Shinobu stood beside a table covered in specimens. Leaves that had turned pale red. Soil that felt wrong to the touch, like it had forgotten how to be earth. A sketch of the crater based on scout reports. The contamination spread slowly but steadily, she explained, voice clinical, despite the implications. Roughly 3 feet per day in a perfect circle from the initial impact site. It doesn't kill vegetation immediately, but transforms it. The cellular structure becomes something between plant and animal tissue. I've never seen anything like it. And the entity itself? Albany asked. Eyewitness reports are consistent. White hair, gray eyes, humanoid build, approximately adult male. The tendrils that emerge from its back are biological in origin. Witnesses describe them as living muscle. They move independently, suggesting advanced neurological control. And they kill demons on contact. Demons die to blessed blades, Sanemi interjected. This thing uses flesh weapons. That makes it a demon. Demons don't flee from prey, Giyu said quietly from his corner. They don't save children. The pattern doesn't fit. Then what is it? Silence. Shinobu adjusted her notes. I don't know, but I'd like to find out before we kill it. Sanemi's expression suggested he had different priorities. Tanjiro listened to it all, one hand resting on Nezuko's box. His sister hadn't emerged yet. Daylight still filled the sky, but he could feel her presence. Calm, curious, not afraid. That meant something. Nezuko's instincts about demons were rarely wrong. We need to find it first, Muichiro said. The forest is large. The contamination gives us a general location, but that still leaves hundreds of acres to search. I'll go, Tanjiro said. Everyone turned to look at him. I can track better in the forest, he continued. My sense of smell works differently than sight. If this entity has a scent, I'll find it. Giyu nodded slowly. Take Zenitsu and Inosuke. Move carefully. If you locate it, do not engage. Send word immediately. And if it attacks? Zenitsu's voice was already trembling. Then you run, Shinobu said simply. This thing killed 4 demons in seconds, according to reports. You're not equipped to face it alone. Sanemi looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to send a full Hashira team instead. But orders were orders, and observation meant staying back unless the situation escalated. They set out at dawn the next day. The forest felt wrong from the moment they entered. Tanjiro noticed it first. The scent was off. Not the clean smell of pine and earth he expected, but something metallic, organic. Like blood, but not quite. Like flesh, but transformed. It made his stomach turn. "This place gives me the creeps," Zenitsu whispered. He was walking so close to Tanjiro, they kept bumping shoulders. Nezuko's box was secured on Tanjiro's back, and Zenitsu kept glancing at it like the demon girl might offer protection. Inosuke crashed through undergrowth ahead of them, boar mask, scanning left and right. "Where is it? Where's this white demon everyone's scared of? I'll headbutt it." "Inosuke, quiet," Tanjiro hissed. "We're trying not to alert it." "Why? We're here to find it, aren't we?" Before Tanjiro could explain the concept of stealth, the scent hit him, not from ahead, from everywhere. A wave of wrongness that made his enhanced sense of smell scream danger. Metallic blood scent mixed with something chemical, something that didn't belong in nature. And underneath it all, threading through like a melody, under noise pain. Profound, crushing, emotional pain that had been carried so long, it had worn grooves into the soul. Tanjiro's hand went to his blade. Not because he felt threatened, because the scent was so overwhelmingly sad that his body didn't know how else to respond. "He's here," Tanjiro breathed. "Close." "Where?" Zenitsu spun in a circle, eyes wide. "I don't hear anything." "Neither do I," Inosuke admitted, which was rare. His spatial awareness usually rivaled Tanjiro's smell. "This thing's quiet." Tanjiro closed his eyes, filtered through the layers. The metallic wrongness was strong, but underneath it, there, northwest, moving slowly, not running, just walking with the tired gait of someone who'd given up on reaching any destination. "This way." They found him in a small clearing. Kaneki stood with his back to them, staring at a tree whose leaves had turned that pale red. He wasn't moving, wasn't doing anything threatening, just standing there like he'd forgotten how to do anything else. He looked worse than the report suggested. Clothes torn and filthy, hair tangled. His visible skin was covered in small cuts that healed as they watched flesh knitting back together with unnatural speed. The air around him seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat waves off summer pavement. Tanjiro's breath caught. The scent. It was overwhelming this close. The wrongness, yes. The metallic blood smell, yes. But that pain underneath it was the scent of someone who'd given up, who kept moving only because stopping meant thinking, who carried guilt like armor because they believed they deserved every ounce of suffering the world could deliver. It was the scent of someone who wanted to die, but couldn't figure out how. Inosuke charged, beast-breathing seventh fang. Kaneki moved, not fast, not aggressive, just a tired sidestep that put him 3 feet left of where Inosuke's dual blades carved through air. The boar-masked boy stumbled, recovered, spun for another strike. Kaneki dodged again, then again, never counterattacking, never drawing whatever weapons he possessed, just moving out of the way with the minimal effort required, like he'd done this dance too many times to waste energy on flourish. "Stop dodging and fight me!" Inosuke roared. "Inosuke, wait!" Tanjiro started. 4 tendrils erupted from Kaneki's back. They moved faster than sight. White-red biomass that looked like exposed muscle wrapped in translucent skin. They spread wide, creating a barrier between Kaneki and Inosuke without actually touching the boy. Inosuke froze, His blades were inches from the tendrils. One more step, and he'd make contact. He didn't step forward. Even through the boar mask, Tanjiro could sense his friend's confusion. These weren't demon tentacles. They didn't feel demonic. They felt alive in a different way. Organic, but not natural. Like something that had been human once and transformed into something else, without quite leaving humanity behind. "Please," Kaneki said. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "Just leave." Tanjiro's hand tightened on his blade. That voice, it matched the scent perfectly. Tired, pained, so deeply sad it hurt to hear. "What are you?" he asked. Kaneki's tendrils retracted slightly. Not all the way. Just enough to show he wasn't preparing to attack. His shoulders sagged. "I don't know anymore." The honesty in that statement hit harder than any blade. Zenitsu had been paralyzed with fear the entire time. Now he found his voice. "You're the one killing demons, the white demon." "I'm not." Kaneki's tendrils withdrew completely, sliding back into his body. The holes in his shirt closed as his flesh healed. "I'm not a demon. I'm just trying to hide until—" He cut off, didn't finish the sentence. Until what Tanjiro wondered. Until the contamination killed him. Until he found a way to die. Until something worse than death found him. "You saved those children," Tanjiro said. "The convoy. You killed the demons and walked away." Kaneki nodded once. Sharp, painful. "Why?" "Because they were in danger." "But you didn't stay. Didn't let them thank you." "They shouldn't thank something like me." The self-loathing in that statement made Tanjiro's chest tighten. He'd heard similar words before, from his sister when she first transformed, from himself in his darkest moments, from people who'd been forced into forms they didn't choose and punished themselves for circumstances beyond their control. His sense of smell had never been wrong about someone's nature. And Kaneki's scent, underneath the wrongness, underneath the blood and chemicals and transformation, smelled human, hurt, desperate, but human. "You're not evil," Tanjiro said. Kaneki's laugh was bitter. "You don't know what I've done." "I know what you're doing now, hiding, avoiding people, trying not to hurt anyone. That's not what demons do." "It's what I'll do eventually. I can feel it. The hunger, the—" He cut off again, hands clenching into fists. "You need to leave, all of you, before I lose control. We're here to bring you back to the core," Inosuke said, still gripping his blades. "For questioning. I'm not going anywhere near people." "You don't have a choice," Zenitsu added, though his voice shook. "The Hashira are here. They're going to find you eventually. Better to come quietly than—" Kaneki's tendrils burst forth again. Not attacking. Defensive. 4 of them spread wide, creating a wall of living tissue between him and the slayers. But Tanjiro saw something they didn't. Saw how Kaneki's hands were shaking. Saw how his tendrils weren't positioning to strike, but to shield. Saw how his entire body language screamed, retreat, not aggression. He was afraid of hurting them. More afraid of that than he was of being captured. Tanjiro made a decision that would haunt the next Hashira meeting. "Run," he said quietly. Kaneki's eyes widened. "What? Run. Get deeper into the forest. Hide better. Don't let them find you until we figure this out." "Tanjiro," Zenitsu looked horrified. "We have orders. He's not a threat." Tanjiro's hand remained on his blade, but his stance relaxed. My nose has never been wrong. He's not evil. He's just scared. Scared things are dangerous, Inosuke countered. Only when cornered. Kaneki stared at Tanjiro. The tendrils withdrew slowly, hesitantly, like he was waiting for the trap to spring. Why would you let me go? Because killing you would be wrong, and bringing you back to people who want to kill you would be just as wrong. Tanjiro met his eyes steadily. I don't know what you are, but I know you're not a demon, and I know you're trying not to hurt anyone. That has to count for something. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Kaneki turned and ran. His movement was inhumanly fast. 1 second he was standing there. The next he was gone, vanished into the forest like he'd never existed. No sound, no trace. Just absence where a person had been. Zenitsu rounded on Tanjiro immediately. What did you just do? The Hashira are going to. I know. Tanjiro's voice was calm, despite the weight settling on his shoulders. I'll explain it to them. I'll take responsibility. Explain what that you let our target escape. That I let someone who was hurting and afraid go free instead of dragging them to execution. Inosuke lowered his blade slowly. You really think he's not dangerous? I think he's dangerous, but not to us. Not to anyone unless they force him into a corner. Tanjiro adjusted Nezuko's box on his back. His sister was quiet, but he could feel her approval radiating through the wood. We need to go back. Tell the Hashira what happened. Face whatever consequences come. The walk back to camp was silent. Tanjiro spent it composing what he'd say. How he'd defend his choice. How he'd make them understand that sometimes the right thing and the ordered thing weren't the same. The scent of Kaneki's pain lingered in his memory. That level of suffering didn't come from evil. It came from someone who'd lost everything and blamed themselves for all of it. Someone who needed help, not a blade. And if the Hashira couldn't see that, then Tanjiro would make them see it, even if it cost him everything. The command post felt smaller with all the Hashira present. They'd assembled within an hour of Tanjiro's return. No formal summons, no official meeting called. Just 7 of the Corps' most powerful warriors converging on the briefing room like a storm gathering strength before breaking. Tanjiro knelt in the center. Zenitsu and Inosuke flanked him, but the weight of attention focused entirely on the boy who'd let their target escape. Sanemi spoke first. His voice was ice over steel. You had orders, observation and report, not engagement, not negotiation, and certainly not letting it run. I know, Tanjiro said quietly. His hands rested on his knees, steady despite the pressure. I made the choice. I take full responsibility. Responsibility? Sanemi's hand went to his blade. You let a potential threat disappear into the forest. It could be planning an attack. It could be feeding. It could be transforming into something worse. And you just let it walk away. It wasn't walking away. It was running. There's a difference. Enlighten us. Tanjiro met Sanemi's eyes without flinching. Running means it's afraid. And things that are afraid of hurting people don't usually attack them. Obanai's voice cut in from the side, quiet but sharp. Things that are afraid get desperate. Desperate things kill. Not this one. Tanjiro's certainty didn't waver. My sense of smell has never been wrong about someone's nature, and that entity, whatever it is, doesn't have the scent of evil. What does it smell like? Shinobu asked. Her tone was curious rather than accusatory. Analytical, she'd pulled a small notebook from her coat and was taking notes. Tanjiro chose his words carefully. Pain. Old pain that's been carried so long it's worn into the person carrying it. And guilt. So much guilt it's almost physical. Underneath the wrongness, underneath the blood scent and chemicals, there's just suffering. The kind that comes from someone who blames themselves for things beyond their control. Demons feel no guilt, Sanemi countered. I know. That's why I don't think it's a demon. It uses flesh weapons. It transforms. It emanates corruption. What else would it be? I don't know, but neither do you. And killing something just because we don't understand it seems... Tanjiro paused, searching for the right word. Wrong. Gyome's voice rumbled through the tension. The stone Hashira hadn't opened his eyes, but tears tracked down his scarred face as they always did. The boy speaks from his heart. His conviction is genuine. But conviction without wisdom leads to tragedy. He's harboring a threat, Sanemi insisted. That makes him complicit. I'm not harboring anything, Tanjiro said firmly. I let someone go who was trying not to hurt anyone. Someone who saved children. Someone who's clearly suffering and just wants to be left alone. Suffering doesn't make something safe. No, but it makes it human. The word hung in the air. Mitsuri broke the silence. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. When I helped evacuate the villages, an elderly woman told me about the convoy rescue. She said the entity's eyes looked sad. Not angry. Not hungry, like it was carrying something too heavy. Witnesses are unreliable, Obanai said. Are they? Every witness says the same thing. It appears when people are in danger. It kills demons. It leaves immediately after. That's not predatory behavior. That's protective behavior. Sanemi's jaw tightened. It's also strategic. Build trust. Lower defenses. Then strike when we're not expecting it. That's paranoia talking, Giyu said. His first words of the meeting delivered with his characteristic bluntness. Sanemi rounded on him. Don't start with me, Tomioka. You of all people should understand caution. Your precious Nezuko is a demon who's never eaten a human, who protects her brother, who proves that transformation doesn't destroy what someone is at their core. Giyu's eyes were cold. You wanted to kill her too. Remember? The temperature in the room dropped. That was different, Sanemi said through clenched teeth. How? Because she had someone willing to vouch for her, because Urokodaki wrote a letter promising to take responsibility. This entity has Tanjiro willing to do the same. The situations are identical. Nezuko is one demon. This thing could be what? More dangerous, less human. Those are assumptions, not facts. Shinobu cleared her throat. If I may. She flipped through her notes. The biological analysis is inconclusive. The contamination is unlike anything in our records. It's not demonic corruption. I've tested demon blood against the samples. They're fundamentally incompatible. The cellular structures reject each other on contact. What does that mean? Muichiro asked. The mist. Hashira had been silent until now, watching with his characteristic detached focus. It means this entity isn't part of the demon ecosystem. It's something foreign. Something from outside our understanding entirely. So it's worse than a demon. Or it's not a demon at all. just something we haven't encountered before. Obanai leaned forward. Foreign threats are still threats. Unknown variables are dangerous by definition. Then we contain it, Shinobu said simply. Study it, understand it, make an informed decision rather than reacting out of fear. That's assuming it cooperates. It's been cooperating. It's hiding, staying away from people, only emerging to prevent deaths. That's cooperation. That's biding time. The argument was going in circles. Tanjiro took a breath. I understand your concerns, all of you. But I saw something in that clearing. When Inosuke attacked, it didn't fight back. It could have killed him. The reports say it killed 4 demons in seconds. But it just dodged. And when its tendrils emerged, they weren't positioning to strike. They were positioning to shield. It was more afraid of hurting us than it was of being hurt. Fear doesn't equal safety, Sanemi repeated. No, but it equals humanity. Animals attack when cornered. Demons attack when hungry. People who are trying not to hurt anyone, they run. That's what it did. It ran because I gave it the chance, and I think that says more about its nature than any amount of speculation ever could. Guillaume's massive hands unclenched slowly. You believe it can be redeemed? I believe it doesn't need redemption. It hasn't done anything wrong. It's contaminating the forest, yes, but not intentionally. It saved children. It's trying to isolate itself. Those aren't the actions of something evil. Those are the actions of someone desperate and scared. Desperation makes people unpredictable, Obanai said. It also makes them human. Mitsuri nodded slowly. I agree with Tanjiro. I think we should try communication before elimination. As do I, Giyu said. Shinobu tapped her notes thoughtfully. I'd like more data before making a final judgment. But the evidence suggests caution rather than aggression. Muichiro shrugged. It doesn't feel like a demon. My instincts usually work. I say we watch it. 4 voices. Not quite a consensus, but enough to create doubt. Sanemi looked around the room. His expression suggested he'd swallowed something bitter. You're all being fools. This thing will kill someone eventually. And when it does, their blood is on your hands. Better that than innocent blood on ours, Tanjiro said quietly. The wind Hashira's hand tightened on his blade. For a moment it seemed like he might draw it, might force the issue through violence rather than debate. Then Guillaume spoke again. We are at an impasse. 4 council patience, 2 council action. I will defer to Oyakata-sama's wisdom. He turned his scarred face toward the door. Kiriya, please send word to your father. We require guidance. The young Ubuya Shiki stepped forward from where he'd been observing silently. He bowed. I will relay your discussion, but I can tell you now what father's orders will be. He said as much before you arrived. Everyone waited. Observation continues. No hostile action unless the entity demonstrates clear threat to human life. If it attacks civilians, eliminate it. If it does not monitor and gather information, we do not kill what we do not understand simply because it frightens us. Sanemi's jaw worked. With all respect to Oyakata-sama, that's a mistake. Perhaps. But it is his decision to make, and we will follow it. The wind Hashira turned and walked out. The door didn't slam, but the silence after his departure felt violent anyway. Obanai stood more slowly. I'll increase patrols around the forest perimeter. If this thing makes a move, we'll be ready. He left with his white snake coiled around his shoulders, each step precise and controlled. The tension drained slowly. Mitsuri smiled at Tanjiro, gentle, encouraging. You did the right thing. Sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing. I hope so, Tanjiro said quietly. Giyu approached as the others began to disperse. His expression was unreadable as always, but there was something in his eyes. Approval, maybe. Or recognition. You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who believed in protecting the different rather than destroying them. Your friend. Something like that. Giyu turned to leave, then paused. Be careful. Sanemi isn't wrong that desperation is dangerous. Just wrong about what that means we should do about it. Then he was gone too. Shinobu lingered, still taking notes. I'll need you to describe everything you observed in more detail. The tendril structure, the way it moved, the scent you detected. Anything that might help me understand what we're dealing with. Will it help keep it alive? That's the goal. Tanjiro nodded. Then, I'll tell you everything. As the command post emptied, Zenitsu finally found his voice. That was terrifying. I thought Sanemi was going to kill you. He might still try, Inosuke added cheerfully. Tanjiro looked out the window toward the forest. Somewhere in that darkness, Kaneki was hiding, running, trying to stay far enough away that his mere presence wouldn't hurt anyone. He'd made the right choice. Had to believe that. Because if he was wrong, if Sanemi was right, and the entity eventually hurt someone, then Tanjiro would have to live with that. Would have to carry the weight of every injury, every death, every tragedy that came from his decision to show mercy. But if he was right, if that suffering entity just needed time and space to find stability, then maybe one lost soul could find peace. Even if it was peace in isolation. Even if no one ever knew its name. The sun set over Koyoharu Forest. The contamination continued spreading. The Corps maintained their perimeter. And somewhere in the darkness, Kaneki heard none of the debate, knew nothing of the faction split, understood only that one person, one single person in this strange world had looked at him and chosen mercy over duty. He didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know if it changed anything. But for the first time since falling through that rift, the crushing weight of isolation felt slightly less absolute, slightly. It was something. It was. Muzan felt it during a business meeting in Asakusa. The disruption was subtle at first. A ripple through his demon network. One of his lesser creations, a lower moon prowling the western territories, suddenly went silent. Not dead. Silent. As if someone had severed the telepathic thread connecting it to him. Impossible. Every demon was bound to him through blood, through his cells woven into their cells, through a connection that transcended distance and death. He could feel them all. Hundreds of his creations scattered across Japan, each a node in a network he controlled absolutely. Except now one node was gone. Not destroyed. That would have sent a death pulse through the connection. This was different. This was interference. Muzan excused himself from the meeting. The human businessmen barely noticed his departure. He'd cultivated the persona of a disinterested investor who left details to subordinates. They would continue their discussions of shipping routes and profit margins without him. He had more pressing concerns. In the privacy of a locked study, Muzan extended his senses through the demon network, searched for the source of the disruption, found it in the western mountains. Koyoharu region. Another demon went silent. Then another. Not dying, just disappearing from his awareness. Like they'd been erased from existence by something that severed his control without killing them first. His jaw tightened. Nothing should be able to do that. Nothing in this world had the power to interfere with his cellular dominion. The Demon Slayer Core could kill his creations, but death registered in the network. This was something else. This was foreign. Muzan delved deeper, pushed his consciousness through the remaining demons in the region, saw through their eyes, felt through their senses. The contamination registered immediately. A wrongness spreading through the forest, not demonic in nature, not natural either. Something that made demon cells recoil on instinct. Something that corrupted vegetation into pale red mutations. Something that created pressure in the air itself. And at the center of it, a presence. Muzan couldn't sense it directly, whatever it was existed outside his network, but he could sense the absence it created. The hole in his awareness, where something powerful moved through territory, he considered his domain. Something that killed demons without his permission. Something that existed without his blood. Something that challenged his absolute control simply by being. For the first time in 1,000 years, Muzan felt something close to genuine curiosity. Then the curiosity curdled into rage. He was the king of demons, the progenitor, the first and strongest. Every demon in existence owed their power to his blood. Every supernatural threat in Japan either served him or fled from him. This thing, whatever it was, answered to no one. It was a free carnivore in his territory. An insult. Muzan's form began to shift. The human businessman's face melted away, revealing the true visage beneath. Pale skin. Red eyes that reflected no warmth. Features that were beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, perfect, and deadly. He reached through the demon network. Not to the weak creatures dying in Koyoharu. To the strongest. To the upper moons. The telepathic summons cut through distance like a blade through silk. 3 consciousnesses responded immediately. They had no choice, his blood compelled obedience. Kokushibo answered first. The Upper Moon One's presence in the network was massive, ancient, disciplined. Master. Doma's response came half a second later, his mental voice carrying that insufferable cheerfulness. You called? How exciting! Akaza was, last his presence burning with barely contained aggression. What do you need? Muzan spoke through the network. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. There is a disruption in Koyoharu. Something is killing our kind. Something that exists outside my control. The Demon Slayer Core. Kokushibo's question was measured. Tactical. No. This is something else. Something foreign. I want it found. I want it understood. And then I want it destroyed. Doma's mental laughter rippled through the connection. A mystery. How delightful. What does it look like? White hair, gray eyes, humanoid form. It emanates some form of corruption that transforms the environment. Lower demons who encounter it either flee or die. It uses flesh weapons that emerge from its body. Sounds like a demon, Akaza said. It's not. I would sense my blood if it were. Muzan's rage bled through the telepathic link. This creature exists independently. It operates in my territory without my knowledge, without my permission. That is unacceptable. Silence in the network. The upper moons understood perfectly. "Deploy to Koyoharu," Muzan commanded. "All three of you. Take whatever lower moons you need. Establish a perimeter. Find this entity. Kill it. And bring me samples of its flesh so I can understand what it is. And if it proves stronger than expected," Kokushibo asked, "then you will discover your limits, and I will come personally." The telepathic connection severed. Muzan stood alone in the locked study. His hands were steady. His expression was calm. But beneath the surface, something burned. Change. He'd said it 1,000 times, change was degradation. Permanence was perfection. His kingdom of demons had been unchanging for centuries. A perfect system. A perfect hierarchy, a perfect extension of his will. Now, something had entered his domain and disrupted that perfection. Something that didn't follow the rules, that didn't obey the natural order, that existed as a variable in an equation that should have been constant. He hated variables. They represented chaos, unpredictability, the possibility that his perfect system might contain flaws, the possibility that he might not be as absolute as he believed. Unacceptable. Muzan's eyes narrowed. Red irises reflecting the lamplight like blood on water. This entity, this foreign carnivore, would be eliminated. Its flesh would be studied. Its secrets would be unraveled. And then Muzan would ensure that nothing like it could ever threaten his permanence again. Change would be rejected. Chaos would be crushed. His order would be restored. And if the entity proved interesting enough, perhaps Muzan would take its time with the destruction. Perhaps he would dissect it slowly, learn what made something exist outside his control, understand the mechanism, then replicate or destroy it as he saw fit. Either way, the foreign element would be removed. Permanence demanded it. Muzan released his transformation. The businessman's face returned. He straightened his collar, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked back into the meeting room with a pleasant smile. The humans continued their discussion of shipping routes. They had no idea their world was about to collide with something from beyond their comprehension. They never did. In the mountains, the upper moons began to move. Kokushibo traveled alone, his 6 eyes scanning the darkness with perfect precision. He felt no emotion about the task, no curiosity about the foreign entity, only the cold calculation of a warrior assessing his target. Doma brought his followers, lesser demons who worshipped him like a god. He hummed as he traveled, genuinely excited about the prospect of encountering something new, something that might surprise him. Life was so boring when nothing unexpected happened. Akaza moved like a storm, fast, aggressive, eager for a fight against something that might actually challenge him. The prospect of facing an entity strong enough to kill demons without effort made his blood sing. They converged on Koyoharu Forest from 3 directions. 3 of the strongest demons in existence, commanded by the strongest demon of all, moving toward a single target who didn't even know they were coming. The stage was set. The pieces were in motion. And Muzan watched through the demon network with patient, calculating eyes. Soon he would understand what this foreign entity was. And then he would erase it from existence. Change would not be tolerated. Permanence would prevail, as it always had, as it always would. They came at twilight. The first scream cut through Jinsu village as the sun bled into the horizon. By the time the last rays of light vanished, the streets were already running red. Lower moons poured through the village perimeter like a flood. Dozens of them. More demons than anyone had seen in one place in living memory. They moved with coordinated precision, not the chaotic hunger of mindless beasts, but the calculated violence of soldiers following orders. Kill everyone. Leave nothing standing. Draw out the foreign entity by destroying what it might protect. The Corps' evacuation had been incomplete. Not everyone had left. The elderly who refused to abandon their homes, families who had nowhere else to go, people who thought the danger was overblown, who believed their small village couldn't possibly matter to demons. They learned otherwise in the first 30 seconds. A lower moon tore through a farmhouse. Wood splintered. Screams ended abruptly. Fire spread from overturned lanterns, turning traditional paper walls into torches. Another demon caught a fleeing family in the street. The father tried to fight with a farming sickle. The blade bounced off demon's skin like striking stone. The demon's claws didn't bounce. The Corps station nearby responded immediately. 20 demon slayers converged on the village. Blades flashed. Breathing techniques lit up the growing darkness with elemental fury. Water, fire, wind, thunder. They killed 3 demons in the first minute. 15 more took their places. Fall back to defensive positions. The unit commander's voice carried over chaos. Protect the civilians. Get them to... A lower moon's claw took his head off mid-sentence. The defensive line collapsed. Then the upper moons arrived. Kokushibo walked through the northern gate like death taking human form. His 6 eyes scanned the battlefield with inhuman precision. 6 crimson points of light that missed nothing. Calculated everything. 3 demon slayers charged him. Veterans, skilled, coordinated. His blade moved once. The moon breathing technique split the air itself. Crescent-shaped auras of cutting force spread outward in overlapping arcs. The slayers didn't even have time to scream. They simply came apart, bodies separating along perfect curves before dissolving into component pieces. Kokushibo stepped over the remains without breaking stride. His target wasn't the core, it was the forest beyond. The contamination zone. The entity that had summoned him here. But the Hashira had arrived. Gayome's chain and axe swept toward Kokushibo's head with enough force to shatter stone. The upper moon one deflected it with casual precision, blade meeting chain in a shower of sparks that lit the street like lightning. Stone breathing, Kokushibo observed. His voice was flat, emotionless. 7th form, adequate. Sanemi hit him from the left. Wind breathing carved spiraling vortexes through the air. The pressure alone would have ripped lesser demons apart. Kokushibo sidestepped. His blade flashed. Sanemi's shoulder opened in a spray of blood. The wind Hashira twisted away, cursing, already bleeding through his uniform. You are strong for humans, Kokushibo said, but insufficient. Muichiro materialized from mist behind him. Silent strike. The technique that had killed dozens of demons without them ever seeing the blade coming. Kokushibo's sword intercepted it without turning around. The sound of metal on metal rang like a bell. Muichiro's eyes widened behind the mist. How predictable, Kokushibo said. His counterattack was too fast to follow. Muichiro took the hit across his chest. Ribs cracked. He flew backward into a building hard enough to collapse the wall. 3 Hashira against Upper Moon 1. They were losing. The southern end of the village had frozen over. Ice spread from Doma's position like crystallizing death. The ground turned to frost. The air itself grew cold enough to burn lungs. Water vapor condensed into glittering particles that caught moonlight like falling diamonds. It would have been beautiful if it wasn't killing everyone it touched. Such energetic resistance. Doma's smile was radiant. Genuine. He looked delighted by the carnage. I do love when my meals put up a fight. His fan swept outward. Frozen lotus scatter. Ice flowers bloomed in the air, each petal a razor that sought warm flesh. They cut through demon slayers like they were made of paper. Blood froze before it could hit the ground. Mitsuri's whip blade intercepted a cluster of petals. Her love-breathing technique turned defense into a dance, the flexible sword wrapping around ice constructs and shattering them. But for every flower she destroyed, Doma created 5 more. Such grace. Doma clapped his hands together. You're wonderful. I simply must add you to my collection. Shinobu darted in from his blind spot. Poison-coated blade aimed for his neck. The insect Hashira was too small, too fast, too precise for most demons to track. Doma caught her wrist without looking. Poison. He examined the blade with genuine curiosity. How creative. But I'm afraid toxins don't work well on me. I metabolize them too quickly. Still, I appreciate the effort. He flung her into Mitsuri. Both Hashira crashed into frozen ground hard enough to crack ice. Now then, Doma said cheerfully, who wants to play next? The eastern rice fields had become a crater. Akaza stood at the center, fists still smoking from the impact that had carved earth like clay. His compass technique spread outward in glowing lines, tracking every living thing within range. Tanjiro and Giyu faced him together. 2 against 1. Akaza grinned. His entire body radiated barely contained violence. That's more like it. I was worried this would be boring. Giyu's water breathing created a wall of flowing defense. Dead calm. The technique that could deflect any attack by reading intent and responding with perfect counter-motion. Akaza punched through it. The shockwave sent Giyu skidding backward, feet carving trenches in mud. His arms were numb from blocking. The force was inhuman. Every strike hit with enough power to pulverize stone. Tanjiro came in from above. Hinokami Kagura, the sun-breathing technique that had killed demons for generations. Fire and blade combined in a descending arc that should have separated Akaza's head from shoulders. The upper moon 3 caught the blade between his palms. Sun-breathing. Akaza's excitement spiked. I haven't seen that in centuries. You must have trained incredibly hard to master it. He twisted. Tanjiro's blade shattered. The boy hit the ground, rolling, already reaching for a backup weapon. Akaza was on him in an instant. A punch that would have caved in his skull, Giyu's sword intercepted it. The water Hashira's blade cracked from the impact, but held. Run, he told Tanjiro. Get the civilians out. I'll hold him. You'll die, Tanjiro said. Probably. Go anyway. Akaza laughed. Pure delight. Such determination, I love it. This is what combat should be. No tricks, no cowardice, just strength against strength. His next punch shattered Giyu's guard entirely. In the village center, Muzan watched. He stood atop the highest building form, silhouetted against rising smoke. His expression was calm, disinterested, like a man observing an experiment rather than a massacre. The upper moons were performing adequately. The Hashira were strong, stronger than most humans, but not strong enough. They would fall eventually. The lower-ranked slayers were already broken. The civilians were dying exactly as planned. Everything was proceeding according to design. Except the foreign entity hadn't appeared. Muzan's eyes narrowed. The contamination was close. He could feel it now that he was near the forest. The wrongness in the air. The pressure that made even his cells uncomfortable. The presence that existed outside his network. It was there, close, aware of the massacre. So why wasn't it intervening? Perhaps it's more intelligent than I thought, Musin mused. Or more cowardly. Either way, the solution was simple. Increase the pressure. Make the cost of hiding greater than the cost of revealing itself. He raised one hand. Flesh tendrils erupted from his body. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Black whips that spread through the village like living shadows. They wrapped around buildings and crushed them. They caught fleeing civilians and pulled them apart. They struck at demon slayers without discrimination. The battlefield became hell. Gyome's chain wrapped around 3 tendrils at once. The stone. Hashira's muscles bulged with effort as he redirected the whips away from a cluster of civilians. Get to the forest edge, run! A tendril pierced his shoulder from behind. Sanemi carved through 5 whips in one strike. Blood poured from a dozen wounds, but the wind Hashira kept moving, kept fighting. His breath came in ragged gasps. How many of these things does he have? Another tendril caught his leg. Bones cracked. He fell. Mitsuri tried to reach him. Doma's ice blocked her path. Now. Don't be rude, I'm not finished with you yet. Shinobu's poison had no effect. Every strike she landed healed within seconds. Doma's regeneration was too fast. Too complete. She was running out of stamina, and he was still smiling. Giyu was down. Tanjiro dragged him toward cover while Akaza laughed and pursued. The water Hashira's arm was broken. Maybe both arms. Blood loss was making his vision swim. Muichiro tried to rise from the rubble. His ribs ground against each other. Kokushibo walked toward him with patient inevitability. The Demon Slayer Corps was dying. The civilians were dying. The village was dying. And in the forest, Kaneki felt every death like a blade to the chest. He'd been holding position in his cave, maintaining distance, trying to convince himself that intervening would make things worse, that his presence would only escalate the situation, that the Hashira could handle it. But the scent of blood carried on the wind, the screams, the sounds of wood splintering and flesh tearing and people dying, children dying, just like Tokyo. Just like every other time he'd told himself that hiding was the merciful choice, that staying away protected people, that his existence was the problem and removing it from the equation would save lives. The rationalizations tasted like ash. Kaneki stood. His kaguni emerged without conscious command. 4 tendrils of white-red biomass that coiled in the darkness. His body was shaking, not from fear, from restraint finally breaking. He'd told himself he would hide, would starve, would fade away alone in the dark where he couldn't hurt anyone. But people were dying. Children were dying. And he was the only one close enough to stop it. The hunger gnawed at him. The exhaustion, the fear of losing control, the knowledge that if he went out there, if he fought, he might not be able to stop, might transform, might become the monster everyone already believed him to be. But Mitsuri was about to die. He could hear her heartbeat faltering from here, could smell her blood mixing with ice. Tanjiro was trying to protect civilians while a demon that outclassed him toyed with his efforts. The Hashira were falling one by one. Warriors who'd spent their lives protecting the innocent were being torn apart while he hid in darkness, and told himself it was for everyone's good. Kaneki's hands clenched into fists. He'd made this choice before. in the coffee shop, in Antiku, in a dozen battles where hiding would have been safer and fighting meant risking everything. He'd always chosen to fight. Not because he was strong, not because he wanted to, but because letting people die when he could save them would destroy what little humanity he had left. Better to die a monster trying to protect people than live as a coward who let them burn. The RC cells in his body surged. His kaguni spread wider. 4 tendrils became 6. The contamination around him intensified as his control slipped. He didn't care anymore. Let them fear him. Let them hunt him. Let them call him demon or monster or nightmare, as long as they were alive to do it. Kaneki burst from the cave and ran toward the burning village, toward the screams, toward the only choice he'd ever really had. In Jinsu village, Muzan felt the shift. The wrongness in the air intensified. The pressure spiked. Something was coming, something that made his carefully controlled expression flicker for just a moment. "Finally," he said. His smile was cold and anticipatory. The foreign entity had taken the bait. Now the real test would begin. The air changed first. A wave of pressure rolled through Jinsu village like a physical force. Not wind, not explosion. Something biological, something wrong on a cellular level that made every living thing's instincts scream danger. The lower moons closest to the forest edge simply stopped. Mid-attack, mid-movement, their bodies locked up as if someone had cut their strings. Then they began to convulse, cells rejecting something, fighting something, losing. They dissolved, not into ash like demons killed by Nichiren blades, into nothing. Their bodies came apart at the molecular level, breaking down into components that scattered on wind that wasn't there. Doma's smile faltered for the first time. How peculiar. Kokushibo's 6 eyes turned toward the forest. "It comes." Muzan straightened. His expression shifted from cold calculation to something sharper. Interest, anticipation. Finally. The white shape burst from the tree line. Kaneki moved too fast for most eyes to track. One moment the forest edge was empty. The next, he was in the village center. 6 kagune tendrils spread behind him, like wings carved from living bone. He'd pushed his body beyond exhaustion, beyond hunger, beyond the fear of losing control. His RC cells burned through what little energy remained, and he didn't care. The contamination around him intensified with every breath. Trees within 20 feet began to pale. Stone cracked. The air itself seemed to thicken. Mitsuri was dying. Doma stood over her with that cheerful smile, frost spreading from his feet, preparing the final strike that would freeze her heart solid. Kaneki's Kagoon struck first. 6 tendrils lashed out faster than Doma could process. The upper moon. Tu's eyes widened, actual surprise breaking through his perpetual amusement as white-red biomass wrapped around his torso, his arms, his throat, then squeezed. Doma's body compressed. Bones cracked. His regeneration kicked in immediately, but the Kagoon was already moving. Kaneki yanked the demon away from Mitsuri and hurled him through 3 buildings. The love Hashira stared up at the white-haired figure standing between her and death. Recognition flickered. The entity from the reports, the white demon, the thing they'd been hunting. It had just saved her life. Kaneki didn't look back, didn't check if she was all right. His attention was already on the next threat. Kokushibo had Muichiro pinned blade descending toward the mist Hashira's heart. 2 Kaguni tendrils shot across the battlefield. They intercepted Kokushibo's sword with enough force to deflect it. The upper moon one's eyes narrowed. He withdrew smoothly, assessing this new variable. "Foreign entity," Kokushibo said. "You are the source of the contamination." Kaneki said nothing. His kagune retracted slightly, still positioned defensively. His gray eyes swept the battlefield, counted the wounded, calculated who needed help most urgently. Akaza had Giyu down. The water Hashira's breathing was shallow. Broken ribs may be worse. Tanjiro was trying to drag him to safety while Akaza circled like a predator playing with prey. Kaneki's Kagune lashed out again. The range was impossible. The tendrils stretched 40 feet across the village in an instant. They wrapped around Giyu and Tanjiro, both yanked them backward out of Akaza's range, deposited them near the other wounded Hashira, then snapped back to defensive position around Kaneki himself. Akaza's grin widened. "Now this is interesting. You're fast." The upper moon. 3 charged. His destructive death technique shattered stone with every step. The shockwave from his punch alone could kill humans. Kaneki's Kaguni met the strike head-on. The impact cratered the ground. A sphere of force expanded outward, blowing out windows and scattering debris. When it cleared, Kaneki was still standing. His Kagune had absorbed the blow, spreading the force across all 6 tendrils. But his feet had been driven 6 inches into the earth. Akaza laughed. "Durable, too. Perfect." He attacked again and again, each punch faster than the last, each one carrying enough force to pulverize steel. Kaneki's Kagune moved in perfect synchronization, blocking, redirecting, occasionally lashing out to create space. But he was being pushed back. The hunger, the exhaustion, days without eating, weeks of RC leakage draining him constantly. He was running on fumes and willpower. And there were 3 upper moons, plus Muzan. Doma emerged from the rubble, still smiling despite his crushed ribs, regenerating. "That was rude, but I forgive you. You're fascinating. What are you exactly?" Kokushibo approached from the left, silent, calculating, his blade already positioning for the optimal strike angle. 3 of the strongest demons in existence, converging on one target. Kaneki's Kagune spread wider. 8 tendrils now. He was pushing his limits, drawing on reserves that didn't exist. The RC cells in his body screamed. His vision swam. But the Hashira were behind him, wounded, dying, unable to fight. If he moved, they died. If he fell, they died. So he didn't move, didn't fall, just stood there with exhaustion written into every line of his body and 8 tendrils of white-red biomass between the monsters and the people who'd spent weeks hunting him. Sanemi coughed blood. The wind Hashira was propped against rubble, one leg clearly broken, watching the white-haired entity hold off 3 upper moons at once. "What the hell is it?" "Our salvation," Gyome said quietly. The stone Hashira's hands were pressed together in prayer. Tears ran down his scarred face. "Or our doom. Perhaps both." Shinobu tried to stand, failed. Her ribs were broken. "The entity Kaneki, he's protecting us." "Why?" Mitsuri's voice was barely a whisper. "We hunted him, tried to kill him." "I don't know," Tanjiro said. His sword was broken, his arm hung at a wrong angle, but his eyes never left Kaneki's back. "But he saved us anyway." Then Muzan moved. Not the casual walk from before, not observation, real movement. The kind that displaced air and left after images. He was behind Kaneki in an instant. Flesh whips erupted from his body, not dozens but hundreds. They filled the space like a forest of black tendrils, each one aimed at vital points. Kaneki's Kaguni couldn't block them all. 3 whips pierced through, one through his shoulder, one through his side, one grazing his throat. Blood sprayed. Kaneki's body jerked from the impacts, but his Kagune didn't withdraw, didn't collapse. They held position, still protecting the Hashira. Muzan's eyes narrowed. "You're dying on your feet. Why continue?" Kaneki's voice came out ragged, the first words he'd spoken since arriving. "Because they'll die if I don't." "They're nothing to you. They're people. They hunted you, would have killed you." "I know." Muzan's head tilted. Genuine confusion crossed his perfect features. "Then why protect them?" Kaneki's laugh was bitter, pained. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth. "You wouldn't understand. Try me. Because that's what people do. We protect each other. Even when it's stupid. Even when it gets us killed. Even when we're so tired we can't remember why we started. We protect each other because the alternative is becoming something that doesn't deserve protection." Silence. Then Muzan's expression shifted. Not to understanding, to disgust. "Weakness," he said, "disguised as nobility. You're dying for strangers who hate you. For a world that wants you dead. And you think that makes you heroic?" "No." Kaneki's Kagun trembled. The exhaustion was winning. "I think it makes me human." "Then humanity is a flaw." "Maybe. But it's my flaw." Muzan's whips retracted. He stepped back, reassessing. This entity wasn't rational, wasn't operating on survival instinct. It was choosing death to protect enemies. That made it dangerous in ways strength alone never could. "Upper moons, Minra," Muzan said. "Coordinate. Overwhelming force. I want it incapacitated, not destroyed. I need to understand what it is." Doma's fans opened. Ice spread across the ground. Kokushibo's blade began to glow. Moon breathing building to full power. Akaza cracked his knuckles, battle lust radiating from every pore. 3 upper moons, acting together. Coordinated assault. Kaneki's Kaguni wavered, 8 tendrils barely holding form. His breathing was ragged, vision tunneling. He'd pushed too far, burned through everything. He was going to fall. And when he did, everyone behind him would die. Behind him, Tanjiro stood, broken arm and all. "We have to help him." "We can barely stand," Sanemi said. "Then we fight sitting down." Giyu tried to rise, failed, tried again, managed to get to his knees. His sword arm was useless, but he had another hand. "The boy's right. That entity is the only reason we're alive. The least we can do is die fighting beside it." Mitsuri pushed herself up. Tears ran down her face, not from pain, from something else. "He saved us, even after everything." One by one the Hashira found their feet, broken, bleeding, barely conscious, but standing. Kaneki felt them move behind him, heard their breathing, their heartbeats, their determination. They were going to fight. Were going to throw their broken bodies at 3 upper moons and Muzan himself because they refused to hide behind someone else. Even someone they'd hunted. Even someone they didn't understand. Warriors to the end. Kaneki's Kagune stopped trembling. Something in his chest, something that had been cold and dead for so long he'd forgotten it could warm, flickered. Not hope. Not salvation. Just recognition. These people. These warriors. They understood sacrifice. understood standing when logic said to fall, understood fighting for strangers even when it meant dying. They understood him, maybe not what he was, but what he'd chosen to be. The RC cells in his body responded to that recognition, to that tiny spark of warmth in the endless cold. They began to change, not to dragon, not to the mindless, consuming beast, to something else, something he'd never reached before. The Kaguni around Kaneki began to glow, white light, pure, clean. The contamination that had been spreading chaos stabilized, compressed, reformed. His exhaustion didn't vanish, the hunger didn't disappear, the wounds didn't heal, but the tendrils stopped wavering. 8 became 10, then 12. Not from desperation, from purpose. Muzan's eyes widened, just slightly. He recognized evolution when he saw it. Interesting, he said. Then the upper moons attacked. The 3 upper moons struck as one. Kokushibo's blade carved moon arcs through the air. Each crescent was a cutting force that bisected stone and steel with equal ease. They came from impossible angles, overlapping trajectories, designed to leave no escape route. Doma's ice spread across the battlefield in crystalline waves. Not the slow freeze from before, this was accelerated, aggressive. The temperature dropped so fast that moisture in the air turned to snow. Buildings coated in frost shattered from thermal shock. Akaza's fists created shockwaves that tore Earth apart. He wasn't aiming for Kaneki directly. He was destroying the ground, collapsing the terrain, forcing movement into predictable patterns. 3 upper moons, centuries of combat experience, coordinated assault. Kaneki's 12 Kaguni moved to meet them. The tendrils split into configurations he'd never used before. 4 blocked Kokushibo's moon arcs. The clang of Kagun on blade pressure rang like bells. 3 wrapped around chunks of frozen ground and hurled them at Doma's advancing ice. The remaining 5 created a web that caught Akaza's shockwaves and dispersed them outward. The coordination was perfect. Instinctive. His RC cells responding faster than conscious thought. But it wasn't enough. Kokushibo's next strike came before the first fully finished. His blade was already moving to the opening Kaneki's defense had created. The moon arc sliced through 2 Kagun tendrils before Kaneki could compensate. The severed pieces dissolved. Kaneki's body jerked as if he had lost actual limbs. His regeneration kicked in immediately, but regrowing Kagun cost RC. Energy he didn't have. Doma's ice found purchase on 3 more tendrils, froze them solid. Crystalline structures spread up toward Kaneki's back. He retracted those Kagun before the ice could reach his body, but that meant 3 fewer defensive points. Akaza used the opening. He was inside Kaneki's guard in a heartbeat. A punch aimed at the torso with enough force to cave in reinforced concrete. Kaneki twisted. The blow glanced off his ribs instead of center mass. Still shattered bone. Still drove him back 20 feet. Still made his vision white out for a second. But didn't kill him. The Kaguni reformed. 12 tendrils again. But thinner now. Less substantial. The regeneration was costing too much. It's adapting, Kokushibo observed. But losing efficiency. The entity is finite. Muzan watched from above. His position on the building gave him perfect sight lines, perfect analysis. He could see what his upper moons couldn't, the micro tremors in Kaneki's movements, the way certain defenses came a fraction slower, the exhaustion building behind every motion. The foreign entity was burning out. Good. Let it exhaust itself defending these humans. Let it drain every reserve protecting enemies. Then Muzan would capture it, dissect it, understand what made something exist outside his control. "Continue," he commanded telepathically. "Pressure, but do not destroy. I want it alive." The upper moons intensified their assault. Kokushibo's blade work became a storm. Moon-breathing techniques layered on each other until the air was nothing but cutting force. Kaneki's Kagun blocked, redirected, deflected, but each exchange chipped away at his reserves. Doma created pillars of ice. Not to freeze Kaneki, but to restrict movement. To channel him into kill zones where Akaza waited. The upper moon, Three's fists were surgical now. Each strike targeted joints, structural weak points, places that would disable rather than kill. Kaneki fought like he was drowning. Every breath was effort. Every movement burned RC he couldn't replace. The hunger was a constant scream in his mind. His body wanted to shut down, wanted to collapse, wanted to stop. But behind him, the Hashira were rising. Sanemi had found a broken blade, one arm. That was all he had. But he dragged himself toward the nearest lower moon and drove steel through its eye anyway. Guillaume's chain had snapped, but he fought with the broken links, swung them like a whip, caught a demon across the throat and pulled until ash scattered. They were fighting. Broken and bleeding and barely conscious. Fighting because that's what they did. Because they were warriors. Because the white-haired entity was still standing between them and death. Kaneki felt their heartbeats, heard their breathing, sensed their determination through the RC haze. They were going to die anyway. All of them. He was too weak, too drained. The upper moons would eventually break through, would kill him, then kill everyone else. Logic said to run, to save himself, to let them face their fate while he escaped into the forest. But that voice, the one that had kept him alive in Tokyo and Antiku in a dozen hells, spoke louder. They're standing. Even broken. Even dying. They're standing. Can you do less? Kaneki's Kagune pulsed, not expanding, contracting. The 12 tendrils began to compress, to consolidate, to transform defensive spread into offensive precision. If he was going to fall, he'd make it count. One tendril shot toward Kokushibo faster than before. The upper moon blocked, but the force drove him back a step. First time he'd retreated. 2 more struck at Doma. The ice demon dodged, but the Kagun carved through his ice constructs like they were paper. Shattered his carefully constructed battlefield. 3 converged on Akaza. The upper moon, 3 blocked 2, but the third opened a gash across his chest. Not deep, but there. First blood drawn. The upper moon's coordination faltered for just a moment. Not from damage, from recognition. The foreign entity had stopped defending. Now it was fighting. Muzan's eyes narrowed. Interesting. Even depleted, it chooses offense. Kaneki's Kagune became a weapon. No more spreading to protect multiple points. No more defensive positioning. Just attack. Fast, precise. Targeting vital areas with surgical accuracy. Kokushibo found himself actually pressed. The moon arcs still cut through Kagun, but the tendrils regenerated fast enough to maintain pressure. Each exchange forced him to give ground. Doma's regeneration couldn't keep up. Every strike from Kagun disrupted his demon cells. The wounds healed but slower. Each contact with RC left corruption that had to be purged. Akaza was grinning. Yes, this is it, a real fight. But even as Kaneki pushed them back, Muzan could see the cost. The Kaguni were thinning, becoming translucent. The white glow was flickering. Kaneki's breathing was ragged. His movements were slowing by fractions of seconds. He was dying on his feet, and he knew it. But he kept attacking anyway. Tanjiro saw it too. He's fading. We have to help. Mitsuri tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't hold her. We have to do something. We can barely move, Shinobu said. Her analytical mind was working despite the pain. And that entity Kaneki, he's not fighting to win. He's fighting to buy us time. Time for what? To escape. To recover. To survive. Shinobu's eyes were fixed on Kaneki's back. He knows he can't defeat them. He's choosing a heroic death over a meaningless survival. That's stupid, Sanemi said, but his voice lacked conviction. That's human. Giyu corrected quietly. Kaneki's vision was narrowing. Tunnel vision from blood loss and exhaustion. His RC cells were cannibalizing themselves to maintain the cocoon. His body was eating itself from the inside. But the upper moons were slowing. Not from fatigue demons didn't tire. From caution. They'd recognized that the foreign entity could hurt them. That its attacks disrupted their cellular structure in ways Nichiren blades couldn't. That made them careful, made them coordinate better, made them take fewer risks, which meant the battle was slowing, which bought seconds, and seconds meant lives. Muzan recognized the strategy. It's sacrificing itself intentionally, fascinating. Most entities would prioritize survival. He descended from the building, landed in the crater Akaza had made. The upper moons sensed him, immediately adjusted their positions to make room. Enough, Muzan said. I'll finish this. Kaneki's cocoon shifted to face him. 6 tendrils left. Maybe 8 if he pushed. That was all. Muzan was fresh, undamaged, the strongest demon in existence. And Kaneki could barely stand. The Demon King's form began to change. The businessman facade melted away entirely. His body became something else, something that shouldn't exist in nature. 7 hearts distributed throughout his torso. 5 brains in locations that shifted constantly. Flesh that could split and reform at will. He was showing his true form. You've impressed me, Muzan said. You've survived longer than any opponent in centuries. Hurt my upper moons. Protected your enemies. Demonstrated abilities I've never encountered. Kaneki said nothing, conserving breath, conserving energy, preparing for what came next. But you're finite, and I am not. Muzan's body exploded, not literally, but that's what it looked like. His flesh expanded into hundreds of whips. Black tendrils that filled the space like a living storm. Each one could pierce steel. Each one moved independently with perfect coordination. They converged on Kaneki from every angle. His Kaguni rose to meet them, white-red against black, foreign cells against demon biology, 2 systems that rejected each other on a fundamental level. When they touched, the reaction was immediate. Muzan's whips began to corrode where they contacted Kagun. Not fast, his regeneration fought it, but noticeably. The RC cells were trying to break down demon cells on contact. Conversely, Kaneki's Kaguni began to darken, where Muzan's whips wrapped around them. The demon blood was attempting to corrupt, to transform, to integrate. Neither process completed. The cellular incompatibility prevented full damage. But it meant every exchange hurt both of them. The difference was that Muzan had unlimited reserves, and Kaneki was running on empty. A whip got through. Pierced Kaneki's shoulder. He didn't scream, just pulled it out and regenerated the hole. Cost more RC. More energy. Another whip caught his leg. Opened the thigh. More regeneration, more cost. His Kaguni were down to 4, then 2. Muzan pressed forward. You're extraordinary. But extraordinary isn't enough. Nothing can stand against me indefinitely. Not you, not the Hashira, not anyone. Kaneki's legs buckled. He caught himself. Barely. Forced himself upright. 2 Kagune tendrils still maintaining form, still trying to defend. The hunger was consuming him now. He could smell the blood, the flesh. The Hashira behind him were wounded, bleeding. Their scent was driving his instincts insane. The monster inside was screaming to feed, to consume, to replenish. Just one bite, just enough to keep fighting, just enough to survive. Kaneki crushed the thought with everything he had left. He would not become that. Would not let hunger turn him into the thing Muzan already was. Would not prove that the only difference between them was which side of control they fell on. His Kagune collapsed. The tendrils withdrew. Not strategically, not tactically. They just couldn't maintain form anymore. His RC cells had nothing left to give. Kaneki stood there. No weapons, no defenses, just a white-haired figure covered in blood who'd burned everything trying to protect people who'd wanted him dead. Muzan's whips poised to strike, to capture, to end this. Then Kaneki felt it. A warmth in his chest, small, fragile, but real. The recognition from before. The Hashira standing despite broken bodies. The choice to fight beside something they didn't understand. But more than that. The hunger, the desperation, the stress, the absolute certainty of death. His RC cells responding not to external threat, but to internal crisis, the same way they'd responded when he became dragon, when his body had transformed to survive impossible circumstances. But this time there was a difference. This time he wasn't alone. This time there were people behind him worth protecting. This time he had a reason to control what came next. The RC cells in Kaneki's body ignited. Not chaotically, not consuming, not dragon, something else. Something that had been building since he fell through that rift. Since he'd saved children. Since he'd chosen to hide rather than hunt. Since he'd stood between monsters and humans and refused to become either. Evolution. True evolution. The light that burst from Kaneki's body wasn't red. It was white. Pure. Clean. Absolute. Muzan's whips recoiled. The upper moons stepped back. And in the center of that light, Kaneki's form began to change. The light didn't explode outward. It compressed. Every particle of RC that had been leaking chaos for weeks suddenly reversed direction. Drew inward, consolidated. The contamination that had been spreading through the forest began to retract, flowing back toward Kaneki's body like water finding its source. The pressure in the air intensified, not the suffocating wrongness from before, something cleaner, sharper, like the moment before lightning strikes. Muzan's whips froze mid-strike. His entire being registered threat. Not the analytical assessment from before. Primal recognition. The kind that came from cells understanding they'd encountered something that could unmake them. Impossible, he said. But it was happening. Kaneki's body became the center of a vortex. White light spiraled inward, layer upon layer, compressing into his form. The wounds covering him began to close. Not regeneration, reconstruction. His flesh was being rebuilt from the cellular level up. The hunger vanished. Not satisfied, not fed, just irrelevant. His RC cells had found a new equilibrium, a stable state where they didn't need external fuel because they'd achieved perfect efficiency. The exhaustion faded. His muscles remembered what strength felt like. His bones hardened. His blood began flowing with purpose instead of desperation. The fear disappeared. For the first time since falling through that rift, Kaneki felt no fear of losing control, no terror of transformation, no dread that he'd wake up covered in blood he didn't remember spilling. This wasn't dragon, wasn't mindless consumption, wasn't chaos wearing a skin. This was control, true control. The white light stabilized, settled into his form like a second skin. When it faded enough to see through the figure standing in its center, was both familiar and transformed. Kaneki's white hair now seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His gray eyes had gained depth, not color change, but clarity, like fog lifting to reveal what had always been underneath. His body hadn't bulked up. No grotesque muscle growth, no monstrous enlargement. He looked almost exactly the same, except for the cocoon. 12 tendrils emerged from his back, not the chaotic branching from before. These were refined, elegant. Each one moved with perfect precision, like fingers that had always known their purpose. The white-red coloration had shifted paler now, almost luminescent. Like bone wrapped in moonlight, they didn't writhe, didn't thrash. They simply existed, waiting, patient. The transformation was complete. Kaneki opened his eyes. The Hashira, still sprawled in various states of injury, could only stare. This was the entity they'd been hunting. The white demon. The foreign threat. But standing in that light with that serene expression, he looked less like a demon and more like something else entirely. Beautiful, Mitsuri whispered. Sanemi wanted to disagree, wanted to call it horrifying, monstrous wrong. But the word stuck in his throat, because she was right. There was something hauntingly beautiful about the way Kaneki stood there. Not powerful, not threatening, just complete. Tanjiro's sense of smell had been overwhelmed by the transformation. Now, as it cleared, he caught Kaneki's scent. The pain was still there, the sorrow, the weight of carrying too much for too long. But underneath it all, peace. The kind of peace that comes from finally understanding yourself. From accepting what you are without apology or shame. From finding balance. Muzan recovered first. His analytical mind processed what his cells had recognized. Evolution. True evolution. The foreign entity had adapted, had taken stress and hunger and the certainty of death and transformed them into something stable, something refined, something that might actually threaten him. Fascinating, Muzan said. His voice was steady despite the recognition humming through his cells. You've achieved in weeks what most demons take decades to approach. Controlled transformation, cellular optimization, perfect integration of your biological weapons. Kaneki turned to face him. The movement was fluid, economical, no wasted motion. I'm not a demon, he said quietly. His voice was different, still ragged from the battle, still carrying exhaustion, but centered, grounded. I never was. Then what are you? Someone who's tired of running. The 12 Kagyun shifted, not aggressively, defensively, ready but not eager. Muzan's expression hardened. You think evolution makes you my equal? No, I think it makes me capable of stopping you. Stopping, not defeating. Defeating would require survival. I'm done trying to survive. Kaneki's eyes held no fear, no hesitation. I'm here to make sure you don't hurt anyone else. That's all. Muzan studied him, read the determination, the acceptance of what was coming. You're planning to die, he said. Statement, not question. I'm planning to take you with me. Ambitious, foolish, but I suppose that's what makes you human. Muzan's form began to shift. The businessman facade was long gone. Now even his combat form was changing, becoming more, preparing for a real fight. Very well. Let's see if your evolution is genuine or simply a beautiful death cry. The upper moons moved to flank him. Kaneki's Kagune spread wider, still not attacking, still holding that perfect defensive posture. But there was a difference now. Before, his defenses had been desperate, exhausted, barely holding. Now they were absolute. Kokushibo's 6 eyes analyzed the configuration, calculated angles, found no openings. His expression, usually so flat, so emotionless, showed the barest hint of concern. Doma had stopped smiling. His cheerful facade cracked just enough to show genuine focus underneath. Akaza was grinning, but there was respect in it now. This will be legendary. Behind Kaneki, Gyome spoke. The stone Hashira's voice was quiet, reverent. We're witnessing something unprecedented. An entity achieving perfect form, not through consumption, but through purpose. Will he win? Shinobu asked. I don't think he's trying to win. I think he's trying to save us. Same thing, isn't it? No. Winning means surviving. Saving means ensuring we do regardless of cost. The weight of that settled over the Hashira. This entity, this Kaneki, was going to die. Was planning to, had already accepted it. But he was going to take Muzan with him. Was going to eliminate the threat that had terrorized Japan for 1,000 years. By choosing death. Sanemi found his voice. It came out rough, uncertain. We should help. We can't, Giyu said simply. Look at them. That's not a battle we can participate in. That's something else entirely. He was right. The pressure coming off both Muzan and Kaneki was suffocating. The RC cells and demon cells were already reacting to each other across the distance. The air between them was beginning to shimmer. 2 apex predators. 2 species that couldn't coexist. 2 forces that nature itself rejected mixing. They were about to collide, and when they did, everything in the vicinity would be unmade. Fall back, Tanjiro said. His voice carried command he'd never used before. Everyone, get as far from this battlefield as you can. We're about to witness something that can't be survived up close. The Hashira began to retreat, slowly, supporting each other, dragging wounded, never turning their backs on the entity that had saved them. Kaneki felt them leave, didn't watch. His focus was entirely on Muzan now. The Demon King smiled. It wasn't his usual expression. This was genuine, anticipatory. I must admit, Muzan said, I haven't felt this interested in a battle in centuries. You've earned my full attention. Lucky me. Indeed. Die knowing you forced me to take you seriously. Few can claim that. I don't want glory. Kaneki's Kaguni pulsed once, white light rippling down each tendril. I just want you gone. Then come try to erase me. The 12 Kaguni tensed. Muzan's flesh weapons emerged, hundreds of them, black whips that filled the air like a living storm. For one perfect moment, everything was still. White against black. Foreign cells against demon biology. Purpose against permanence. Then they moved. The collision shook the earth. White light and dark flesh met in an explosion of force that carved the village center into a crater. Buildings collapsed. The ground split. Fire and destruction spread outward in a perfect circle. At the center, two figures clashed. Kaneki's 12 kagune against Muzan's 100 whips. Refined precision against overwhelming numbers. Controlled power against infinite reserves. Evolution against permanence. The battle for existence had begun, and only one would see its end. The first exchange lasted 3 seconds. Kaneki's 12 kagune moved like surgical instruments. Each strike targeted vital points with precision that shouldn't exist. Muzan's hearts, his brains, the central nervous clusters that controlled his regeneration. Muzan's 100 whips responded with overwhelming volume. They didn't need precision when they could fill every cubic inch of space. Block every angle. Force movement into predictable paths. When the two forces met, reality flinched. The impact created a shockwave that flattened everything within 50 feet. Stone turned to powder. Wood ignited from friction. The air itself seemed to crack. Kaneki's kagune punched through 17 whips in that first exchange. The RC cells disrupted demon tissue on contact, causing localized cellular collapse. Each whip that touched his tendrils began to corrode. But Muzan had 100 whips. Losing 17 meant nothing. 3 got through Kaneki's defense. 1 pierced his shoulder, 1 grazed his ribs, 1 wrapped around his leg. His regeneration activated instantly. The wounds closed. But the demon blood tried to corrupt the healing tissue. His RC cells fought it off, but the process cost energy. They separated, assessed. Kaneki's breathing was controlled, not labored. The Shirogane form had given him reserves he'd never possessed before, but they were still finite. Muzan's expression showed calculation. Cell reversal. Fascinating. Your attacks disrupt my regeneration at the molecular level. But you can't generate enough force to overwhelm my recovery speed. I don't need to overwhelm it. Kaneki's kagune shifted configuration. I just need to disrupt it long enough. For what? Kaneki didn't answer. He attacked again. This time 8 kagune went high while 4 swept low. The coordination was perfect. Muzan's whips intercepted the high strikes, and Kaneki's lower tendrils carved through 30 whips before Muzan could redirect. The Demon King's regeneration kicked in. The severed whips regrew instantly. But Kaneki had achieved something more important. He'd gotten close. For one fraction of a second, 3 of his kagune were within arm's reach of Muzan's body. They struck as one, pierced through the Demon King's torso at points Kaneki had calculated would contain hearts or brains. The cell reversal surge activated. Muzan's organs tried to regenerate. The process stuttered, hesitated. His cells couldn't remember their configuration for just a moment. The RC interference disrupted the information that told them how to rebuild. It only lasted half a second. But half a second was enough for Kaneki to read the pattern. To understand how Muzan's regeneration worked. To map the biological network that made the Demon King immortal. Muzan felt the intrusion, felt his cells being analyzed, being understood. Clever, he said, but understanding my structure won't help you destroy it. You're right. Kaneki withdrew, his kagune repositioned. But it tells me how to bind it. Muzan's eyes narrowed. Then Kaneki accelerated. The Shirogane form's true capability wasn't strength. It was speed. Refined, perfect speed that came from absolute control over every muscle fiber, every nerve impulse, every cellular contraction. He was suddenly everywhere. 12 kagune striking from 12 angles simultaneously. Not possible. The human mind couldn't coordinate that many independent movements. The body couldn't process that much sensory feedback. But Kaneki's evolution had transcended human limits without abandoning human purpose. His kagune moved like extensions of thought itself. No delay between intent and action. No gap between decision and execution. Muzan's whips tried to track him, failed. The Demon King was fast, had always been fast, but Kaneki was operating on a different principle now. Not faster in absolute terms, faster in efficiency. Zero wasted motion, zero hesitation. Pure refined action. The cell reversal surge hit Muzan's body 17 times in 4 seconds. The Demon King's regeneration began to stutter. Not stop, not fail. Just hesitate. Lag. Struggle to keep up with the disruption. And in those microseconds of lag, Kaneki's kagune carved deeper. Found the organs Muzan kept hidden. The backup hearts. The tertiary brains. The redundant systems that made him functionally immortal. Found them and disrupted them. Muzan's perfect regeneration began to show cracks. Impossible, he said. But his voice carried strain now. I am absolute. I am permanence itself. Nothing is permanent. Kaneki's kagune wrapped around 3 of Muzan's whips, yanked them out of formation, created an opening. Everything evolves or dies. You just chose not to do either. His next strike took off Muzan's arm. It regenerated in 2 seconds instead of instantly. Progress. The upper moons tried to intervene. Kokushibo's blade carved toward Kaneki's back. The moon arc would have bisected him. But 4 kagune intercepted without Kaneki even turning around. His combat awareness had expanded beyond vision. He could feel the spatial displacement. The pressure changes. The intent. Doma's ice tried to freeze his feet to the ground. 2 kagune shattered the forming frost before it could solidify, then lashed out and caught Doma across the face. The upper moon, too. Two's head snapped back. His regeneration stuttered for just a moment, cell reversal disrupting demon cells. Akaza charged in with a punch that could shatter mountains. Kaneki's kagune caught his fist. Held it. The force created a crater beneath them, but the tendril didn't break. You're strong, Akaza said. Genuine admiration in his voice. Incredibly strong. I'm desperate, Kaneki corrected. There's a difference. He released Akaza's fist and simultaneously struck all 3 upper moons. Not hard enough to kill, he didn't have the power for that, but hard enough to drive them back, to create space, to return his full attention to Muzan. The Demon King had used that brief reprieve to reorganize. His regeneration had stabilized. His whips had multiplied not 100 anymore, but 200, 400. He was pulling biomass from deep reserves, transforming his own body into weapons. I acknowledge your capability, Muzan said. His voice was cold, final. You've forced me further than any opponent in a millennium. But capability has limits, and I do not. His body exploded into flesh, not figuratively. His entire form converted into pure biomass. a writhing mass of muscle and teeth and eyes and mouths that expanded to fill the space. The technique that had overwhelmed countless enemies, that had crushed armies, that had made him the undisputed king of demons. The mass engulfed Kaneki. For a moment, he disappeared inside the crushing weight of demon flesh. Then white light burst through. Kaneki's 12 Kagun erupted outward, with enough force to tear through the biomass. They spread in a perfect sphere, creating space, driving back the crushing weight. But Muzan's mass kept coming, kept pressing, kept trying to suffocate and crush and overwhelm. Kaneki's Kagune began to glow brighter. The RC cells were overclocking, burning through reserves at an unsustainable rate. He couldn't maintain this forever. Didn't need forever, just needed long enough. His Kagun began to move in a new pattern, not striking outward, reaching inward, wrapping around each other, interweaving, creating something that had never existed before. A structure, a cage, a cocoon. Muzan felt it forming and tried to pull back, tried to retreat. But Kaneki's Kagune had already woven through his biomass, had already integrated with the Demon King's flesh at the cellular level. They were connected now. "What are you doing?" For the first time, Muzan's voice carried something other than confidence. "What is this?" Kaneki's 12 Kaguni completed the cocoon, sealed Muzan inside with him, created a biological prison that neither could escape. "White Lotus collapse," Kaneki said quietly. "The only technique I have that can kill you. You can't kill me. I'm immortal." "You're right. I can't kill you." Kaneki's hands moved to his chest, pressed over his heart. His RC cells were already responding to his intent. "But I can make us both cease to exist." Muzan's eyes widened. True understanding, true recognition. The foreign entity wasn't trying to defeat him, wasn't trying to overpower him, wasn't trying to outlast him. It was trying to erase both of them from existence. "You're insane," Muzan said. "Probably." Kaneki's smile was sad, tired. "But I'm also done." The RC cells in his body began the final reaction. Every cell, every molecule, every particle of foreign biology that didn't belong in this world began to activate simultaneously. They reached critical mass, began the chain reaction that would destabilize their own existence. And through the cocoon, through the integration points, where Kaneki's Kagun had woven with Muzan's flesh, the reaction spread. Demon cells and RC cells. Two systems that could never coexist. Two biologies that rejected each other on a fundamental level. Forced together in a space neither could escape. The reaction was inevitable. "No," Muzan said. He tried to regenerate, tried to adapt, tried to escape. "I am eternal. I am perfect. I am dying." Kaneki finished. "Same as me." The white light inside the cocoon intensified. Not the pure white of Kaneki's evolution, not the controlled light of refined power. This was something else. This was annihilation. The cocoon began to glow. Brighter, brighter. Too bright to look at directly. From the village edge, the Hashira could only watch. They'd retreated as far as they could while still seeing the battlefield. Now they witnessed something that defied explanation. The cocoon of Kaguni and demon flesh was transforming into pure light, white and absolute, like staring into the sun. "What's happening?" Mitsuri whispered. "They're both dying," Shinobu said. Her analytical mind was working despite the horror. The entity Kaneki, he's causing a biological collapse, forcing his cells and Muzan's cells to react, to annihilate each other. Can Muzan survive it? I don't know. But Kaneki isn't trying to. Tanjiro's hands were pressed together. Not in prayer. In something closer to grief. His sense of smell was overwhelmed by the reaction. By the scent of two beings ceasing to exist. But underneath it all, he could still smell Kaneki. The sadness, the determination, the acceptance, and something else, something he hadn't smelled before. Relief. The light reached its peak. For one perfect moment, everything was white. No shadows, no darkness, just absolute radiance. Then it collapsed. The implosion was silent. The cocoon folded in on itself, drawing all the light inward, drawing the biomass, drawing the very space it occupied, drawing everything into a single point of nothingness. When it finished, there was nothing. No cocoon, no Kaneki, no Muzan, no Kagune, no demon flesh, just absence. A perfect sphere of empty air where two beings had erased each other from existence. The upper moons stared at the void. For the first time in their existence, they felt their connection to Muzan sever, not death, not distance, just absence. He was gone. Truly gone. Kokushibo's 6 eyes closed. It's over. Doma's smile had vanished. He actually did it. The foreign entity. It actually killed Muzan. Not killed, Akaza said quietly. Erased. There's a difference. The 3 upper moons looked at each other. Without Muzan's blood binding them, they were free. Could do anything. Go anywhere. They chose to leave. Not because they feared the Hashira, but because the being that had just erased their master had earned something they'd never given before. Respect. The Hashira remained standing, waiting, hoping. Maybe Kaneki had survived. Maybe the foreign entity had found a way to erase Muzan while preserving itself. Maybe ash began to fall. Not gray ash like demons left behind. White ash. Like snow. Like flower petals. Like something beautiful that had burned itself away to create light. It drifted down from where the cocoon had been. Settled on the ruined village, on the Hashira, on the ground. Kaguni dust. The last remnants of Kaneki's existence. Tanjiro caught one particle on his hand. It dissolved at his touch. Left no trace. Just gone. He's really dead, Mitsuri said. Tears ran down her face. He saved us and died doing it. Not just us, Gyomei said quietly. The stone Hashira's tears were flowing freely. Everyone, every human Muzan would have killed. Every demon he would have created. Every life he would have destroyed. Kaneki saved them all. And no one will ever know, Sanemi said. His voice was rough. No one will ever know what he did, what he sacrificed. We know, Tanjiro said. He was still holding his hand out, still feeling where the ash had been. That has to be enough. The white ash continued to fall, like snow in summer, like tears from heaven, like the last beautiful thing a sorrowful creature could leave behind. Tanjiro closed his eyes. Let the ash settle on his face. Let it mark him. His sense of smell had never been wrong about someone's nature. And Kaneki's nature from the very first moment they'd met had been clear. Human, hurt, desperate, carrying more pain than anyone should have to bear. But human, not a demon, not a monster, not a threat. Just someone who'd been forced into a form he didn't choose and spent every moment afterward trying not to become what that form should have made him. Someone who'd saved children and asked for nothing. Someone who'd protected enemies because that's what people did. Someone who'd stood between the world and annihilation and chosen to burn with the darkness so the light could survive. Someone lonely. Someone who'd never belonged anywhere. Someone who died making sure a world that feared him would live. The loneliest person I have ever met, Tanjiro said quietly, and the most human. The white ash continued to fall until dawn. By the time the sun rose over Jinsu village, it had settled into the earth, become part of the soil, part of the world. No marker, no grave, no monument, just memory. And the certain knowledge that somewhere in the ruins, mixed with the ash and dust and destruction, was the last trace of something that had saved everything by choosing to become nothing. The Hashira would rebuild, would recover, would continue their mission. But they would never forget the white-haired entity that had appeared from nowhere, fought alongside them, and vanished into light. They would never forget that sometimes salvation comes from the places you least expect. Sometimes from the very things you hunt. Sometimes from sorrow that learns to walk. And sometimes, just sometimes, the greatest heroes are the ones who die alone, so that others don't have to. The story ended where it began, in silence, in darkness, in the space between worlds where lost things go. And in that space, if you listened carefully, you might hear the echo of someone who'd finally found peace, not through living, not through victory, but through the knowledge that his death meant something, that he'd protected people who'd never know his name, that he'd saved a world that had never wanted him, that in the end, despite everything, he'd remained human. And that was enough. It had to be enough, because there was nothing else left.